played.
Champions Cup performance. A thriller here in the blinding heat. Never before have they reached the semi-finals in 18 seasons of trying. They've done it without Danny Kerr. They've done it without Joe Marler. They're into the semi-finals and they will play Toulouse or Exeter, and they beat Bordeaux by a conversion goes over. That's the effort from Edinburgh, but it's the shots. Battle gallantly, but come away with a hard-fought win. Not always easy to have territorial advantage for much of the
Welcome back. Guess who's back? Back again. Scoopy's back. Tell a friend. Hey, guess who's back? Guess who's back? Yeah, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Rugby Scoop podcast. Oh, man, we've been away for a wee while, and it's so good to be back. Vickers, from your sabbatical, from your rugby competitions all the way in Russia, how are things going, my man?
Yeah, it's good to be back. Yeah, it's been a while, eh? Jesus, I think it's almost like, 3 weeks or something. But yeah, it's been good. It's been good. Team didn't do it badly. Lost a crucial game, quarterfinals, but managed to get third place the following weekend. So, yeah, things are looking up. I think just one or two things I need to fix before the next few rounds.
Fair enough. How's the weather that side? Because I saw you've been tweeting about having to put on sunscreen in Russia.
It's gorgeous, mate. I think no one can, not in April, not in April. In April, we're usually clearing out snow, but we haven't had that in a while. So now everything is clear, it's sunny, so everyone is just in a happy mood when you walk around the streets.
All right, and Hugh, the stats man, how have you been doing, bro?
I'm good, mate. I'm glad to be back on the show with you guys, learning all the things, talking about all the things. Can't wait to get into it. You always manage to schedule the pod to clash with a big game of some kind, so I'm missing the first half of Toulouse versus Exeter just for you. So if it's another Harlequins Bordeaux special, I'll be invoicing you for my time.
Fair. Fair enough. That is actually quite a big game. I mean, I think I need to also set it up online while I'm having the chat with y'all as well. Jade, the Bloom Man, Mr. Heatwave, how are things?
Nah, it's cold here, bro. It's cold in Bloemfontein. Heatwaves is done. Time for the OBS. Time to take out the old brown sherry. It's cold in Bloemfontein, bro.
Nah, fair enough, gents. Without wasting any time, I think a lot has transpired, obviously, over the past 2 to 3 weeks. I just got back as well from Portugal. There was a youth international tournament held in Lisbon. We were there with Rugby Europe, and things were I was quite impressed actually at the standard and obviously at some of the developments that are currently happening over in Portugal. The structures and the foundations that they've put in place for this kind of competition as well, and just the young players and the young talent that's coming through from the developmental structures that are based in Portugal as well. There's a lot to come from Portugal, and I think they're really going to be a force to be reckoned with in a couple of years, obviously. But I think they've got the right platform that they've put in place, and they've got the right people as well that are also part of their coaching and development in their within their rugby. Yeah, from my side, obviously based in the Netherlands, there was the Ereklasse, our championship competition this side. Just a few elements in terms of results. Obviously, looking at how Rotterdam, the rugby club that I'm also part of, coming away with results, beating a team called Castricum, and now we have moved up to second spot in the log. Aimland number 1, Rotterdam Rugby Club number 2, The Hague number 3, and Rugby Club Gooi number 4. And obviously we are at the back end of the season, so we are fighting for a home semi-final spot. And yeah, so hopefully we can maintain that and get into the nitty-gritty of playoffs as well at the end of the season. Anyway, gentlemen, we're going to start off the show with our roundup of Super Rugby. And then from Super Rugby, we're going to have a chat about the European Challenge, Investor Cup, EPCR, and obviously maybe one or two comments in terms of chasing the sun, and also talk about all the other stuff that have been surrounding South African teams participating in Europe. This conversation cannot seem to go away where South Africa is involved. I mean, we had the similar conversations when it was Super Rugby. It seems like the same conversations are being had when it comes to South African teams joining the European competitions. Jade, Super Rugby, talk to me. Which team or which game was your highlight of this past weekend?
Well, obviously, there was a few close games. I mean, there was the first poor game. It was Friday. That was the Reds against Moana Pacifica. That was crap. I don't think we'll talk too much about that. And then, obviously, Crusaders and Tars was a good game. It's just ironic that Waratahs has won 2 games this season, both against the Crusaders. And, you know, I think the Crusaders have themselves to blame for that game. It was a high-scoring game with limited defense. But yeah, I mean, a guy like Raviz Rayana, not looking at the clock, I mean, the shot clock before kicking over that last conversion. I mean, the game was done. He should have just waited for the hoot and then kicked over and they would have won. And then it went into Hugh's favorite golden point. And, you know, the Tars got a new hero in Harrison with the drop goal. So, like the Tars, will praise him this week and then they'll get walloped in the next game again. So that's typical Waratahs for you. But then the game of the weekend obviously was the Chiefs against the Canes. I mean, I didn't expect the Canes to be this physical this season, but they are an absolute outlet, well coached. One of the few teams that actually has a good defense or a decent defense in this competition. I think them and the Blues are the 2 teams that has a good defense. So a guy like Corey Jane, who's the defensive coach, has really been, you know, done a good job there together with Clark Laidlaw. But I mean, their physicality at the breakdown, guys like Asofa Moore, Braden Ayose, Peter Lakai, those guys are bringing it, the breakdown time. They're bringing the physicality. I mean, I said it a few weeks ago. When last we see the Hurricanes team this physical up front, smashing the Chiefs at scrum time. Taylor Romax really showing that. I mean, he's the All Black tight head prop. He's proving his worth in this competition. And then the backline, you know, once those guys start to run, Moby must be knocking on the door very hard for All Black selection this year. I mean, there's very good wingers, but I mean, he can slot into that All Black team very easily. But yeah, that was a game for me, Scoop. The Canes against the Chiefs. I mean, the Canes are what now, 7-0? And they really look like the team to beat.
No, 100%. I also think that was probably one of the best games we've seen in Super Rugby actually in the past couple of weeks. In terms of physicality, I love the fact that there is a bit of a focus from from the New Zealand coaches as well in terms of fronting up with their forward packs. I mean, the loose trio of the Hurricanes absolutely dominated Summer Penifee, Luke Jacobson, and Wallace Satiti from the Chiefs. I mean, they were nowhere in that game, to be honest. If we compare a back row to back row, I think the Hurricanes back row, even when Karifi Duplessis came on, he also had an impact as a loose forward as well. And they've really, really, really paid attention into how important it is to have a very strong forward pack and a very dominant forward pack in this competition. Because if you look back at how good the Crusaders have been over the years, it's because of their forward pack. And I think Clark Laidlaw and the Corey Janes of this world understand the fact that you need to have a very dominant forward pack. You need to have a very good defensive platform that you can operate from in this type of competition. Do you see any team actually beating the Hurricanes this season? Can they go all the way, 15-0 or 12-0?
Look, Scoop, I'm not going to go away from what I said. I still think the Crusaders, because they still got to play Moana Pacifica and they still got to play a lot of games at home. I think they can pick up 4 or 5 wins and make the playoffs, right? And if the Hurricanes in top and they get the Crusaders, in that quarterfinal game, Crusaders with the mighty Williams back, with Barrett back. I think by that time Fergus Berg will be back. Ethan Blackadder should, if he's fit, he'll be there. Leo Willie will be there. They'll be a different beast, and that team knows how to win playoff rugby. They just know how to stand out. Maybe they can catch the Canes like Quinn scored Bordeaux the weekend, off guard and pull a surprise. You never know once it comes to playoff rugby. And I mean, I wouldn't want to play, me as a Blue supporter, I wouldn't want to play the Crusaders in that quarterfinal fixture. I wouldn't want to play them because they know how to do it, And I mean, that's their goal. They just want to end up in the quarterfinals, and they know they can take it game for game. They can go anywhere and they can win. They back themselves. But I don't see a team on par with the Canes at the moment. They just fluid. I mean, they lost their best player in Cam Roygard. Yeah. And they still continue, to roll over opposition. I mean, they gave the Chiefs a hiding. I mean, it's not a narrow victory. They gave them a hiding. They won by a bonus point. So it shows, the quality of that team. And I mean, Scoop, you speaking and we all talking about the physicality. Remember preseason, the amount of videos they put up of Sofa Moa benching over 200 and Numia squatting 300. And we all thought, these guys are just show ponies, they're flexing. But they're actually doing it on the field as well,
Yeah.
On the field. I mean, I saw for Moa yesterday. We said his training wheels must come off this season, but this boy's playing.
Yeah.
He's playing.
The fried train. Safa Moa. Oh, Vickers, you've made a few comments as well regarding Super Rugby. You had a few chuckles when it comes to defense, but obviously you were also quite in high praise of the hooker, Safa Amua. Over the weekend, just thoughts on your behalf regarding Super Rugby. Any games that you watched, or what were your highlights rather actually regarding Super Rugby this past weekend?
Yeah, I think Jade has said it all. I think the game of the weekend obviously was the Hurricanes game. I think the Hurricanes were trying to fly the forwards directly back to Hamilton with the scrums. But they took them to the wall and they like grind them out. But I think for me the most important was to see like the New Zealand teams know how to attack, and I think they know how to beat their own defense. I still haven't seen a lot of teams in New Zealand that are doing that blitz defense that we always talk about, like the Box or Leinster now and the French teams. I think for me, that's one of the things that I would still like to see in Super Rugby. But other than that, I think, like you guys have said, I think the players just stood out. That also guy I didn't even know about, and they just stood out. His ball carries were dominant. I mean, when you look at Aoma, is it Aomau? Omawa. But
Amua.
Amua. He was flipping. He's quick, eh? He reminds me of Dane Coles, actually, back in the days. You know, I think that's one of the things that stood out. And I mean, his ball carries were quite solid as well, and that's why he got the tries that he did. Yeah, but other than that, it was actually good to finally catch up on Super Rugby. I haven't been able to watch a couple of games, and yeah, still a bit bored about Australian teams. But yeah, we'll leave that to another day.
leave the Aussies out of it. Mr. Griffin, your thoughts or highlights from the teams in Down Under?
I'm afraid that the only game that I watched the majority of was the Moana Pacifica game, which was
your favorite team.
Yeah, I love the team, but my God, one of the worst games of rugby I've seen in the last year. My goodness me, absolutely terrible. Hurricanes obviously seem to be the ones to beat at the moment. I'm surprised that, the Chiefs got to the final of Super Rugby last year and seemed like at one point that they were going to topple the Crusaders when they were at the end of their peak. But the Hurricanes weren't quite competing at that level. And of course, they've lost Surveyor and a couple of other guys, but they seem to be the strongest team at the moment. What is it? 7-0? You can't argue with that. Surprised at how well the Rebels are doing. The Rebels, I've seen them play really badly. I've seen them get some really bad results, and then I've seen them get some okay results. I don't know what to make of the Highlanders as a team, as a concept. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're aiming for. And then, I kind of subscribe to what, what's his name, Ryan Lowe has been saying on his YouTube channel of the Crusaders will sneak into the playoffs in 8th and then just go on a winning spree and then reclaim their title. That's why I'm backing to happen, especially when Lee Halfpenny is back. So that's my prediction for this season of Super Rugby. But it's the least predictable Super Rugby season that I've watched in a while, which is amazing. But I feel like with the exodus of players from New Zealand, it's because the New Zealand teams have dropped back rather than the Australian teams have stepped forward.
Ooh. To our friends Down Under, that was Hugh Griffin. You can find him on Twitter. Jade Mbubelelo has a question. Has posed a question for you regarding the Chiefs. Are they on a mini crisis? That is the question from Mbubelelo Zuza.
I think in big games, they're so orientated to, with Damon McKenzie and the way he plays, and he's their spark, and obviously they lost Stevenson also early in the game. So I think with them, all the game focuses around Damon McKenzie. And for me, like yesterday, you had to show a little bit more patience, They had the game at 23-17, they were leading. And, there was a few times where he tried to put through a grabber kick or he tried something where rather just be patient, set up the play, trying to get the Canes offside, milk the penalty, kick to poles. That's what you need as a number 10. You don't always need the razzle-dazzle from him in these big close games. But it's difficult to say. I mean, if you look at them, I think they missed, was it the 5 lock yesterday, Lord and Salbericket, the two of them, especially at line-out time, they missed them because they're really a focal point at line-out time. So I think that was a big loss for them yesterday. And I mean, if you're looking at the shuffle they had at loose forward, they tried to bring in Wallace Atiti from the start, which is a good move. But I mean, then they moved Jacobson to 7. So they lost a out-and-out guy in Kalen Boucher, who slows down the ruck time, who slows down the ball at breakdown time. So that was an adjustment they made up front. But for me, it's true what you're saying. I don't see the Chiefs having the scrum to match the Blues or the Canes or the Crusaders, actually. I don't see them having that scrum. I think you can milk penalties off them, and we saw it yesterday with the Hurricanes, getting scrum penalties, getting advantage. And when it comes to playoff time, that's actually crucial, So for me, that's the Achilles heel at the moment. Is their props is not to the standard to what the Blues and the Canes and the Crusaders have. So that's a concern. But then again, they were in the final last year. They can still be there. I mean, they're not going to panic. They know just get a home quarterfinal and so on. We'll take it from there. And also, we'll see this log shape up in the next month or so because there's a lot of Australian teams that needs to tour to New Zealand. And there'll be a lot of big games like between the Blues and our Canes. The Blues, the Chiefs need to play each other. The Chiefs plays the Canes again. So, they've got to knock each other off there. So then you'll see actually they start to flex their muscle. So yeah, let's give it a month and then we can answer this question actually.
Oh, fair enough, and well said there, Jade. If you didn't know what the results were over the weekend, we've got the Rebels 47, Highlanders 31. You got Hurricanes 36, Chiefs 23. Waratahs pipping the Crusaders on the buzzer, actually. Waratahs 43, Crusaders 40. High scoring game there. Moana Pacifica 17, Reds 14. And then with results going into the Investec Championship, a lot of talk during the week, especially coming from the Blue Bulls, coming from the media, a lot of conversations. Results there in the quarterfinals, Northampton Saints 59, Bulls 22, Leinster 40, La Rochelle 13, Wallop, the defending champions there. Bordeaux 41, Harlequins 42, very close game. You heard it on the soundbite at the beginning of the show. And then you have Toulouse 31, Racing 92, 7. That's not the score. Racing 92 is the name of the team. Not the scoreline. All right, gentlemen, moving into the next conversation. There's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of conversations. There's been a lot of interviews with the infamous South African coach at the Blue Bulls, Jake White. There's been a travel debacle concerning a lot of South African teams. Bulls to London, for example, leading up to this weekend. Apparently, the cost for South African rugby to take the Bulls from Pretoria all the way to London was summed up to 4,108,000 rands, which is quite a hefty amount that SA Rugby had to cough out. And there's been obviously a backlash from the UK media regarding Jake White sending a B team or a weakened blue side to play against Northampton Saints. Hugh, you are in the UK, and obviously the media that side are not taking kindly to what has transpired over the weekend. Jake White complaining about travel, and then all of a sudden sending a weakened blue side. And obviously there's talk about not respecting the Investec Championship competition. I mean, what do you make of all of this? I don't want to call it sideshows, but yeah, it seems like sideshows at the moment because it's the second season where South Africa is involved in Investec Championship competition. And last year we had probably similar conversations. This year the same conversations are popping up. I mean, what do you make of this? Is it going to be a continuous thing where we go back and forth every single time it's playoffs? Oh, we have to pay extra amount, or we don't want South African teams in the competition, this and that. I mean, what is your take? Firstly, I mean, you've shared your views where URC is concerned, but now with Investec Championship, I mean, what is your take over this whole debacle and South African teams being involved?
I think if the South African teams are in the URC, then they have the right to be in the Champions Cup, and it's up to them if they want to be or not. I think if they're especially at the moment when they're paying for the privilege to be in the URC, then they pay for the rights to be in EPCR as well. I think they're actually paying to be in EPCR as well. So they are bringing money to the competition. I believe Investec is a South African company. Is that right? Yes, I'm getting a confirmation for audio listeners. So the audience, I've talked about this loads of times. The audience size in South Africa is just huge. As a market for rugby, you're stupid to turn your back on it. So freely from a financial point of view, it'd be crazy not to have the South Africans in it if you have the option to have them in it. Specifically with this debacle, it's not a good look for the Bulls. It's not a good look for Jake White to kick up a fuss about the flight situation, especially when he's then going to send a B team. Not even that, the third and fourth team in some positions. With the flights and things, well, firstly, the scheduling of this whole season of the Champions Cup and European rugby has been a disaster. It's really got it wrong. I think having the knockout rounds where you don't know who you're going to be playing against where 2 weeks back to back is crazy. They never used to do that. I don't remember the round of 16 and the quarterfinals being back to back ever before. This is new for this season. I don't understand, because that's not a fan first approach, in my opinion, especially now we've got longer distances to travel. I sympathise with the South African Rugby Union. I can imagine it's an absolute nightmare. I've spoken before about URC. Scheduling the URC is bad enough. Trying to arrange flights from South Africa to get to Northampton, which, you would have had to fly somewhere else in England and then travel to Northampton, would have been a long distance, but still, I can just imagine it was an absolute nightmare. The South African Rugby Union clearly weren't happy with Jake White's comments. They decided to out who was getting flown business class and who was going via where, so it's all gotten a bit ugly. I don't think anyone comes out of this looking good, to be honest, especially when what was it, 57, 59, 22, the final score yesterday. It's just not what we want to be seeing. So I think the scheduling is the first thing that needs to be changed. One could, if one wanted to put on the tinfoil hat, say, has the scheduling been done to disadvantage South African teams? There's been a suggestion that Qatar Airways, who are one of the main sponsors, they help with flights to South Africa, but they don't help with flights from South Africa. So I think they just need to sit around the table. The organisers need to sit around the table and say, we don't want this to happen again. How do we stop it from happening again? And for me, the scheduling is the thing that needs to change.
Yeah, fair enough. Vickers, you were involved in URC previously as well, but obviously not in the Investec, but in the Investec Championship Cup. But in terms of travel, I mean, how difficult was it for you guys back in the days with the Kings, and obviously the Cheetahs that were involved in Pro 14? There were never any debacles or anything that I can think of regarding obstacles, challenges when travel was concerned when you guys were involved in Pro 14. But all of a sudden, it seems like obviously within URC last year, there was a lot of talk about traveling as well. And then obviously now with the Heineken or Investec Championship Cup, there's a lot of talk about traveling, especially from the South African aspect. I mean, what challenges did you guys face when you were part of the European competition?
Yes, look, nothing has changed. I don't think anything has changed. I think the matter of coaches or the organization just accepting what it is, what it is. Because we used to fly, for example, from Port Elizabeth to Joburg to Doha to Heathrow, bus to Cardiff. So that's massive travels. That's massive travels, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just a matter of, like I say, it's just a matter of understanding what needs to be done and accepting it is what it is. We flew, obviously the Kings don't have as much money as the other teams. So we used to fly, I think the first 4 rounds we flew business class, and then after that it all changed back to economy. So it does get a little bit tough on the players. But like I said, it's what it is. Nothing is going to change. And especially because, remember, we as South Africa and you can say Africa, we chose to go into Europe, whereas Europeans, it was easy for them to travel amongst each other and play amongst each other. But now we have chosen to get into that market, which means we are going to suffer in terms of that. So we must accept it. I mean, they spoke about the Sharks, Edinburgh putting up a good team against the Sharks on the weekend, but then they've got a URC game this weekend back at home. So it's a thing for everyone. It happens to every team. It happens to everyone. It's just a matter of who's accepting it better, who's accepting it more, and just continuing with it. Because I can understand the fights between the two gentlemen, but we won't go into that. But I think for me, the most important is that we never want to lose sight of a product. We never want to lose sight of what the product is giving South African rugby. And they're doing it well. I mean, it's doing well for South African rugby, but it's a matter of now just understanding what can we work around it, what can we work around, and what's possible, what's not. And as you have said, sit around the table and let's have a chat about the scheduling. Let's have a chat about all aspects to make sure that it's not going to be comfortable for everyone, but at least everyone is happy.
Yeah. Jake?
Yeah, no, I agree with what Vuyo said. It's taxing on the players. I mean, if you look at La Rochelle last week, they could take a business class flight from France straight to Cape Town and then go back, West Africa to detour. And I think once the South African teams start to get dividends, they start to get profit from these competitions, start to be shareholders, then we'll see them maybe, have a more of a say. In terms of, these logistic problems that they are having at the moment. So I think for the next 2 years, we'll see these stories floating around until they get, their profit share from these two competitions. The other thing is regarding Jake White. I mean, this is not the first time we've seen Jake White do this. I mean, he's done this when he was a Bok coach in 2007, where he sent a weekend team to Australasia, to play against New Zealand and Australia. I mean, the likes of Ashley Johnson and Waylon Murray and all of those guys got caps, in New Zealand and Australia. But yeah, I'm not actually too upset with him for doing it. I mean, if you look at it, he plays Munster next week. And he's got to fly all the way back to Pretoria, play Munster. Munster's fresh, waiting for him in Pretoria. And if he does lose that game, I mean, that does dampen or does affect the opportunity to host a playoff game. It can affect them to move them down on the log, and they might just lose out to the Stormers in terms of African Conference as well. So I agree with him. I can see why he did that and sent the weekend team, because I mean, when do those guys get back to Pretoria? Maybe Wednesday as well, and then they got to prepare for Munster. So, and obviously, realistically, has a better chance of winning the URC than the Investi Cup. So I agree with him with what he did there. But yeah, it's not the first time we've seen Jake do this. I mean, it is one of his things. He likes to send B teams around and, play around with the media and stuff. But I can understand where he's coming from.
No, fair. Hugh, listening to what Jade has said, listening to what Vuyo has said as well, I'm trying to put something together here. That's why I asked this question about the travel, about the complications, the challenges. But looking at the Blue Bulls, your favorite team, how realistic is it for Jake White and the Blue Bulls to win the URC Championship 2023, 2024?
Well, I think they've got as good a chance as anyone who aren't Leinster. The defeats that they had out, and I think we missed the pod that week, didn't we? The defeat that they had out in Leinster would have been a real kick in the teeth for them. If they'd have managed to pick up a victory there, they would have been in with a shot of finishing top of the table, and then they would have had a home shot all the way in the playoffs, probably. And Leinster wouldn't want to go to Loftus to play. No one wants to go to Loftus to play. I don't think you're beating the Bulls there. Now, because they lost that game, it is likely that the Bulls will finish second or third. And that will mean that should they get to the final in the URC, it will be away from home, probably in Leinster. That's not where you want to be. But I think that, like I said, Leinster are clear favourites, but I think Bulls are probably second for me. I think they're the only ones who can give Leinster a serious headache. Leinster's first team a serious headache.
Fair enough. Vickers, your thoughts? How realistic is Jake White's chances of winning the URC?
I think it goes exactly what Hugh has said, because if you look at it, he had to look at the chances of him obviously winning the Investec, and look at the amount of travel that he will have to do with if they keep on maybe knocking the teams out and then going all the way. And then you look at what are the chances of us hosting a playoff game in Pretoria. I mean, that's the hardest place to go to for anyone. Even guys in South Africa struggle to go to Pretoria. So I think that's what Jake has looked at. And I mean, Jade said it. I don't have anything against Jake for choosing to stick with what he wants the most. I think he wants the URC the most, and obviously once they've got that in their bag, then they can start to see what other tournaments what other cups that they would like to get in their bag. But I think first and foremost for Jake, it's basically URC. He wants as many playoff games in Pretoria as possible, and that's why he probably did what he did.
True. Jade?
Yeah, no, it all depends on Leinster, and I think Leinster also tours South Africa now, so it'd be interesting to see what squad they send through. They send through to South Africa, you know. So, I mean, are they going to send the likes of Torres and Van der Vlier, Josh Van der Vlier sleep at home in South Africa at his parents' house, or will he stay in Ireland? But yeah, we'll see what team they send to South Africa, you know. And I mean, if Leinster sends a weakened team down, there's opportunity they can slip up in South Africa and give the Bulls maybe a chance, you know, to end top. But yeah, it all depends on them, because to play Leinster in Ireland, and also the psychological blow from, you know, losing that game against Leinster a few weeks ago is in the back of these Blue Bulls guys' minds. So yeah, let's see what Leinster does when it comes to Africa.
So Cameron Hanekom was sleeping in Wales this past weekend while Van der Vlier.
Yeah. He's.
All right, gentlemen, fair enough. The big game this past week, okay, not this past weekend, but the big game on Saturday, I think there was big highlight, or there was a big hype around the La Rochelle Leinster game over the weekend, but Leinster proving way too strong. And I remember when we started the pod, obviously in the past seasons, after learning that Jacques Nienaber would be moving into a director of rugby at Leinster. We spoke about it. We spoke about him being there as well, and we said we want to give him time in that position on the saddle and find his feet at Leinster. Vuyo, can we say now that Jacques is finally settled, looking at how Leinster performed yesterday, looking at how Leinster performed against the Blue Bulls? Now there seems to be momentum, good defensively, good attack platform. They seem to be finding their feet, and they're looking very dominant, especially with incumbent World Player of the Year in Jameson Gibson Park. Talk to me, Vickers.
Yeah, look, I would definitely say he's settled in now. He's obviously brought in a different mindset when it comes to South Africa. You know how South Africa have always wanted to be dominant up front and be dominant just in the forwards. And I think that's what they've started to do. I mean, I think Porter made a turnover yesterday, and I think Fulham also made another turnover. So they're starting to get their props to go in and mess up the breakdown. Yeah, so I think definitely Jacques has got something to do with that. I think, as you said, I think he's settled. I think he's definitely settled. What I did like and see, though, like what I saw yesterday, was that they use the 9 differently in the defense system, whereas in South Africa, it's always hogging the blind side and shooting if anything comes back on the blind side. But what I liked is that they've basically got that old sweeper back because of their blitz defense, so that Goodison Park was just covering all the chip kicks and all the grubber throughs, which was actually quite good to see that he can have that kind of mentality and change his own strategy, his own philosophy on defense to accommodate what the game is moving towards. So yeah, I think definitely Jacques is settled in, and yeah, and also another thing, like I said, the physicality of those boys yesterday, which was just amazing. It was actually similar to I would call it a test match level in terms of physicality.
No, 100%. Hugh, your thoughts on Leinster and La Rochelle? What highlights do you have from that particular game? And obviously, are you seeing also the ingredients of Jacques Nienaber sprinkled across the Leinster structure or platform?
The one that people talk about when it comes to Jacques Nienaber's influence on Leinster is the influence on the defence, which is now very, very good. And you can see that they had a little shaky start at the beginning when he first came in, but now they're really into their stride with it, which is impressive because obviously he's not an Ireland coach, and these players that play for Leinster in the big games are the Ireland's national team, let's face it, and they've got to switch between the two different systems. They won't be like night and day different. They'll be cut from the same cloth, but there'll be different subtlety changes to it. I can see the influence in some things like the tactics, like Leinster are going 6-2 a lot more these days, and they're making the substitutions in the pack en masse, which I think is really a trend that South Africa started that everyone is now adopting. So I think maybe they possibly they could have picked that up even if Nienaber wasn't there, but it's the work that Nienaber has done with South Africa that has influenced the whole of rugby to start adopting that. So for me, look, Leinster are always going to be a top team, and I think it shows that when it comes to the amount of money that Leinster have to spend, they're not just getting the best players in Ireland together. They're not just taking their pick of high-quality, non-Irish qualified players to come and supplement them. They're also going out there and getting the best coaches in the world, and I think that's just the level that they're operating on is so far above certainly any other URC team, probably any other team in Europe, to be honest.
Fair enough. Jade, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, look, I agree with what Vuyo said in terms of the tweaks he made in defense. I mean, you can see it with a 9. I mean, getting into the sweeper role as well. And, I mean, he did make those tweaks. But for me, we all praise Leinster, and every year we expect him to win this competition. But, I mean, La Rochelle has always come up and popped them in the end. I just feel that, as good as Leinster was yesterday, I think it might be an end of the era for this current La Rochelle team. I think they need to freshen up a bit. I think there's a few players there that has carried the team as far as they could. I mean, they've won what they could win. I'm not saying O'Gara should leave or anything, but I just think that, you get these cycles in sport where you need to freshen up, and maybe that's the end of the La Rochelle cycle, because let's be honest, last week for me, they were lucky to beat the Stormers. I mean, they hung in there, and they hung in, but the Stormers could have won that game at the end. And I just feel that was a complete difference between La Rochelle this year and last year, where La Rochelle last year would have, blitzed the Stormers and been more physical, etc. But yeah, I think La Rochelle, for me, they might be at the end of that cycle, that you get that with these successful teams where that you need to freshen up a bit. But for Leinster, they just continue to build into that machine. And I mean, they added in this Jacques Nienaber now, and the defense seems to be much, much more effective in these big games. We'll see if... I hope they get to lose in the final, because that will be a good final if they do get any of these other pommy teams in the final. So I think they'll blitz them. But yeah, I think for now it's their competition to lose at the moment.
Fair enough. Mr. Griffin, I saw during the week you did some stats regarding, obviously, highlights viewership. We've spoken quite a lot about viewership over the past couple of pods regarding rugby's viewership, or the rugby's presence on social media, and obviously YouTube element as well. And you had come up with some very interesting insights regarding this particular aspect. Can you share some of your findings regarding viewership across the board with all competitions involved?
Sure. So this is from a week or so ago. So I looked at the most recent rounds of each tournament at the time. So I think it was round 7 of the Super Rugby, and then none of the Northern Hemisphere competitions have played around since then. And what I found was that Super Rugby, in terms of YouTube highlights, have by far the most views of any league, of any of the big 4 leagues. The big 4 leagues being Super Rugby, URC, Premiership, and Top 14. I didn't look at the Japanese league. If people would like to know, the Japanese league viewership seems to be around the same-ish as the English Premiership, which I'll tell you what that is in a second. So the Super Rugby is averaging about 130,000 views per video. There are some that go much higher than that. Not very many dip below 100,000 views per highlights video. URC has a big spread. The South African teams get by far the most views, and you can expect a South African team to get 100,000 plus views on YouTube for their highlights, and you can expect something like the Welsh teams to get much lower than 50,000 views. And then with the Premiership, you can expect around 50,000 views as an average. And then the top 14 is the least. Now, the top 14 highlight videos are a bit weird. Number 1, they're in French, which you would expect them to be because it's a French competition, but it's not exactly international, so that probably impacts the highlights viewership around the world. And also, it's not live commentary. It's like a narration for the top 14. So it's like, and then this happened and that's happened. Wow, did you see that? And it's quite different. and I don't think they publicize them very much. I should say that all of this data is taken from the official YouTube channels of the leagues. So this isn't taken from Sky Sports or TNT. The broadcasters do also upload the highlights onto their own channels. That wasn't taken into account for this study. So I asked the question, why is Super Rugby so far ahead? And to me, there's two reasons. One is the time difference. So a lot of games people don't watch live. So they have to watch Super Rugby, the catch-ups on YouTube, because getting up at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning isn't palatable to some people for some games. Secondly, Super Rugby is mostly behind a paywall, whereas URC and Premiership have free-to-air games. Top 14 is a bit complicated. I'm not quite sure about the TV deal there. But URC in particular, there's one Welsh game on free-to-air every week. I think the Irish have a lot of free-to-air games, so they don't need to, including non-Irish games, so they don't need to watch it as much. And I also think that, to be honest, and you guys can tell me about this, I think the South Africans have still got one eye on Super Rugby. And I think that South African fans still like to keep an eye on the Kiwis, see what they're up to. And I think that drives some of the viewership upwards. But again, it just goes to show how big of a market South Africa is for rugby. I was surprised that the top 14 viewership figures were so low, though. That really surprised me.
Yeah, I'm also quite surprised by that as well, because looking at how well the competition has marketed itself and obviously the finance that's been put behind the competition itself, it's quite surprising.
We'll come in on one more point. I actually looked at the Welsh region specifically for their own YouTube channel. So Ospreys YouTube, Scarlets, Dragons, Cardiff own YouTube channels. Not good. Each of them, I think the highest one is Ospreys. They average 800 views per video. Not 800,000, 800.
Jeez.
The marketing of the URC in Wales, without going on to a whole separate rant, is pathetic. It's terrible. It's awful. Cardiff Rugby haven't uploaded a video to YouTube in 2024. So it's just a completely different dynamic. And for context, I was looking at Exeter's YouTube channel earlier, and they're getting thousands of views per video. So for whatever reason, some people just don't really care about YouTube. And I looked at TikTok as well. It's the same sort of story over there. Some people just aren't bothered about it seems.
I'm surprised they even have TikTok. I was about to say, do they even have a Twitter profile? Interesting. Jade, you want to chime in?
Yeah, guys, when you were off, all of you, Vuyo and Scoop, this past few weeks, I actually did some homework and I actually did some rugby stuff and scratched around. And to add to what you mentioned here, I actually found a good clip from 2 Cents Rugby on YouTube, where his point of the clip was to explain the difference between league and union. And he actually came up there with crowd attendance, top 14, URC, Super Rugby and the Premiership and obviously League. So League's attendance, the average attendance has been the most, is averaging in about 20,000 or so. And then you get top 14 with 18,000. And then the URC was 16. And then Premiership is about 14 and Super Rugby is about 13. So to add to that, you and to your stats that you provided us there with the viewership on YouTube and everything, I think that's really one to mention. If I can have a look at that clip that he put up, it explains also the amount of the popularity in terms of Super Rugby teams on Facebook and on Twitter compared to the other teams around the world, where the social media from the French top 14 teams has not been so well managed and promoted as to the Bulls, the Stormers, and the bigger Crusaders and the Blues and those guys. So and the other thing I wanted to add was South Africa, in terms of watching highlights, we do use the platform DSTV Catch Up on SuperSport, and that is actually where we do get a lot of our highlights from. And there is no Super Rugby highlights on DSTV Catch Up this season, so that also plays a role as to why Super Rugby's viewership, the highlights, is so high this season.
Yeah, go ahead, Hugh.
That's really interesting about the highlights channel. Thank you for telling me that. I had no idea. Just on the game attendances, again, a bit like YouTube views, the URC sees a big variation. So you get, I think the Stormers are like the third most watched
rugby team in the world this year. They get like 24,000 a game. It's ridiculous. But you've got Leinster as well get big crowds. Munster get big crowds. Essentially, the South Africans and the Irish, as you would expect, get the big crowds. Benetton's crowds are growing. Benetton are having to extend their stadium. A lot of people are really interested in stadium occupancy, and I had someone saying to me, like, oh, what about stadium occupancy when it comes to crowd size? Stadium occupancy only really tells me how big your ground is. So, like, for example, Stormer's ground in Cape Town, I don't know how big it is, 40,000, something like that, 40 plus thousand. Do you think they're looking at Benetton's 5,000 ground, seeing 4,500 people in it and going, God, jealous of that, our stadium's only half full? No, of course they're not. Of course they're not. They've got 5 times the number of people in there. So I don't really agree with stadium occupancy as a stat. That's just my personal opinion. But the point I was going to make was Irish and South Africans get big crowds. Again, the Welsh don't at all.
Fair enough. Now, this leads us to my next question. Obviously, looking at stadium attendance, the following, and obviously social media presence. We had news breaking out this week that Europe and Super Rugby have agreed on Club World Cup to be held in 2028. So, Hugh, coming back to you again. You've also had a conversation on your pod as well about this particular topic. I mean, can you share your views, and why do you think this is a good idea, or why do you think this would be a bad idea?
I think it's a bad idea. I think the way it's been put forward is a bad idea. So if there was to say be, in football, you've got the Club World Cup in football. I don't know exactly what it's called, but you get the winners of the Champions League and then different leagues around the world come together and play that. So it's just the winners. So if it was a case of URC versus Premiership versus Top 14 versus Super Rugby versus Japanese versus MLR or whatever it is, the winners of that, the Cup Winners' Cup or something, which used to be a thing in football as well, I'd be all for that. The way that they're suggesting that it works would be the top 6 Super Rugby teams, the quarter-finalists of Champions Cup, and we've got a listener, James, he's constantly waving his hand. He's really distracting me. Oh, he's left now. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. So they were saying 6 Super Rugby teams, the quarterfinalists for the Champions Cup, and then 2 guests, which they suggest will be the Japanese teams. I am not in favour of that in any way, shape, or form. The way that the Champions Cup is done, like, it would be such a luck thing. It would be such a thing of luck, essentially, of who gets into it. And you have to remember that 8 English teams out of 10 still get into the Champions Cup. So there's a likelihood of more English teams being in there. And the way that the Super Rugby is at the moment, you're looking at a situation where potentially you have 3 Australian teams in this Club World Cup, 1 Irish team and 1 South African team. That just doesn't pass the laugh out loud test for me. I mean, we've seen, if we go on to whether it would be a success or not, we've seen Jake White send a B team to the Champions Cup. So what's he going to send for this? God knows where it's going to be held. I suspect it's going to be held in New Zealand or Australia. I'll be honest, that's where I think it's probably going to be hosted. I did a poll on Pirate Rugby, and like 80% of people suggested that Super Rugby was the main driver behind this, that Europe didn't really need it. And I don't think Europe needs it at all. You have to remember as well, for the URC teams, 8 teams get into Champions Cup. So if it's the quarter-finalists of the Champions Cup, you're looking at the vast majority of the URC probably know 18 months out, 12 months out from this Club Cup that their team isn't going to be in it. And so immediately they're switched off. And that's not just a few clubs. That is like whole nations. That's like all of Wales, all of Italy, probably most of Scotland knows they're not going to be in this competition. And also, last point, a World Cup with like 6 nations in it, that's not a World Cup. Where's the MLR team? Where's Black Lion from Georgia? Where's the guarantee of an Italian or a Welsh or a Scottish team in it? There isn't any. So it's clearly a money-making thing, and I suspect it's a money-making thing for the Super Rugby teams. I don't see the Europeans really buying into it, with the exception of 1 or 2 maybe, who might like the prestige.
Oh, jeez. You are making scrumming flower half smile from ear to ear, Hugh. Jade, your thoughts?
Yeah, he's making scrumming flower smile from ear to ear. Can't wait to see his tweets later on, just ranting off Super Rugby again and saying, yeah, they needed South African teams to save them, etc., etc. But yeah, I agree with you on this. I don't actually think we need this competition. I think let's live in that fantasy world where we could always debate who's better between, Crusaders and Leinster or etc., etc. Also, what does this do to the international season? Are we going to lose out on tests? When are they going to have it? We're going to lose out on South Africa. Going to lose out on the incoming tests in June and July. So what happens to that? I mean, obviously there is a rugby calendar that we're going to follow, but also, what happened to our test games? So I'm not one for this. I would like them to have to plan it much better. Maybe having the best Welsh club, best South African team, and have something like that, But I don't agree with the format. I don't agree with the setup. I don't actually like the format of the Investic Champions Cup as well. I think it favors, or this is not a true reflection of the strength in depth in certain countries, because now we have a possibility now, just for example, of having 3 English teams in the semi-finals and not one French team in the semi-final if Toulouse doesn't beat Exeter. So it's not a true reflection of the leagues, and can we really call it a Club World Cup if the best teams is not there? So yeah, I agree with you with this. I really do agree. I think let's just stick on to what we're doing now and let's see where we go from here.
So I've got a span. Let me throw a spanner here in the works, Hugh. So what if, hypothetically, we take one one Super Rugby Championship winner, one Japanese League One, MRL winner, and then we take Premiership, URC, French Top 14. That is 6 teams, and then maybe Black Lion. That is 7 teams. I'm trying to find an 8th team now.
Peñarol from South America, maybe.
Fair. Let's make that 8, and then we scrap international inbound tours that happen in June, and then that whole competition can just take place in those 4 weeks of June, for example. So the first round in the first week will be a quarterfinal. Second round would be a semi-final in week 2. Have a gap or a breather or rest period for the teams, and then host a final at whoever has the most points can host it at home, or you have a neutral venue. But I don't think neutral venues would work for this particular competition, because then you would lose out on a lot of revenue for either clubs or either teams that are participating in the competition itself. So I would think maybe a team with the most points gets to host a final on their home ground, for example. Thoughts?
Yes, if they were going to do that every year. I don't see them scrapping any test matches. I don't say, if you're England, why would you scrap your test matches if you've only got 1 out of your 10 teams playing in this? You just wouldn't, even if it's Saracens, which is most of your international side, you would still go and play your test matches. I think that, it's not new news that the rugby calendar is a mess anyway, and that there's pretty much no space for this competition to be played. In terms of the location, I think that's my other problem with this Club World Cup, is that it's every 4 years. So as a Welsh fan, I'm probably looking at decades before I see a Welsh team in it. So why would I care at all? So yeah, would I watch what you just described? 100%, absolutely, every day of the week.
Yeah, 100%.
Do I think that's realistic at all? No, sadly.
Vuyo?
Yeah, but then again, you guys are talking about teams from South America, and Georgia. How many of those teams are going to get pumped by 60 points by these other top nations? So for me, it's just one of those where I don't see the point. You only allowed to contract 45. It's not contract. Register 45 players in your squad. And if you really look at the number of competitions that are happening already, it's massive on those numbers. I mean, they're probably replacing every 3 to 4 weeks, probably replacing about 4 or 5 of those players. So it's going to get to the stage where you basically need huge squads, which is going to mean you need more money, which is going to mean more resources. So I don't see it happening. And then also, if you look at the international, window, basically the June, what you call summer or winter test, it's basically preparing your teams for Southern Hemisphere teams, preparing them for the champions, for the used to be Tri-Nations, preparing them for that. And if you're telling South Africa to scrap their inbound tours with teams like Ireland, with teams like that's big money for South Africa. Those stadiums are filled up.
Yeah.
So it's I don't think they'll do that. And then also, if you're going to scrap the international window, when then do you get your players as a national team to start training? Especially if you look at, for example, like Leinster. Leinster has to travel to South Africa. Say now they have to play something like that kind of cup. So does it mean that they'll take a B team to this kind of World Cup of clubs?
Yeah.
Or do they go with their main team and then take a B team to South Africa for the first couple of weeks or something? I don't know. So I don't know. I don't see it working. It's impossible.
No, fair. I mean, very valid points raised with this particular competition. And let's see, obviously, what sort of agreement or some platform or how they would want to run this going forward. Obviously, they've shared the idea, but let's see if they stick to the particular idea that they've shared. And also, Hugh just said as well that it's every 4 years, so which means after every Rugby World Cup, there's a Club World Cup to look forward to as well. So if your team doesn't make it past the quarterfinals, you can look forward to maybe winning some silverware the following year for your club. No, no shots fired. Gentlemen, thanks for your views on that particular topic. Now we move to the end of our show. Obviously, we don't end the show without any shithousery moments. I've only got 2 shithousery moments this week. First one, Jake White complaining all week about travel, and obviously at the end of the day he still sends a B team to play against the Northampton Saints. And then shithousery moment number 2 is Ronan O'Gara taking the piss and taking his La Rochelle team to train at Munster ahead of the Leinster game. Obviously, you understand the rivalry between the two sides, quite heavy in that regard. Vickers, your shithousery moment between Jake White and Ronan O'Gara.
You know, I said it to you in the week. It's the two egos, mate. It's the two egos in South Africa. They're bashing at each other every week until someone is replaced as director of rugby.
Heavy. Okay, that is Jake White. Hugh, yours?
I'm going for Rog because that's the one that I nominated. The fierce bitterness between Munster and Leinster fans going on all week about how Munster fans have been supporting La Rochelle, etc. You love to see it. That's what sport's all about for me. So I'm going for that.
Fair enough. Jade?
Yeah, I'll also give it to Raj for this one, just because I hope that, I actually wanted La Rochelle to win yesterday just to get the noise pollution down on X. But yeah, I'll give it to Raj just for that tactics, because he is turning out to be Leinster's father.
Fair enough, gentlemen. Thank you very much to our listeners. Thank you very much to my panel. Vuyo, welcome back. Hope everything, obviously, you're still pushing and working quite hard to get your team into the right area this season in Russia. And Hugh always providing us with the best stats. You can also listen to his podcast, Pirate Pod. It's also on YouTube. And then Jade Craig, the Heatwave man, always always willing to share great information regarding Super Rugby. We have our Super Rugby preview during the weeks on Thursdays. That's usually on our timeline on X or Twitter, if you prefer, where we look at the preview of the week of Super Rugby weeks, basically. Gents, thank you very much once again. Great to be back. And Vuyo wants to say something before we go.
Jade, just give us an update, mate. Who's the head coach of the Cheetahs next year?
Okay, Saki has the job now. Isak van der Westhuizen has the job now, but obviously it's a given, guys. Come on. Who has been coaching them the whole time?
What do you mean it's a given? Who is it?
It's a given, guys. It's a given. What's Rampina gonna do?
I don't know. Assist?
Okay. I don't see him working at his garage. I don't see him, sitting there at his shell or at his complex. He'll be there. I think he'll get it.
They still own that shell garage there by Loch Logan.
No. They hit it down. They're actually extending the mall there.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. I hope I see you guys or hear you guys next week again. Looking forward to it. We're back, guys. We're back every Sunday, 4:00. This is the place to be, and this is where Rugby Insight is shared. Have a good Sunday. Have a good evening. Have a great week ahead, and goodbye.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Cheers.